Somebody said good morning. Come on. Getting mad about that is the equivalent of getting mad about the arts. It's a good thing, if you feel confused because art is supposed to be outside of politics. It's just pure expression. But of course, there's some pieces and elements of certain contemporary times that one might feel more deeply because one is more attuned with what is the highest institute of art that this country has ever known. But who would not want that to happen? So no one really, but maybe a few people, misguided ones. Why not? Got all types of misguided people. In my comedy routine starts again. Ever been on the highway? Everybody knows the rules. Why are there so many damn accidents and people going the wrong way at 150 miles per hour down these streets? Y'all know what I'm talking about, that live close to these places, but other people have no idea how these cars be flying through the air and being torn apart with the people inside. So it's probably better people don't know all the bad things about life, but still, some things like religion or theology or philosophy, those things are known to help individual and social problems at the same time. That's why they're so prized. But it also makes them hated by people who stand in the way for whatever reason. It could be a conceit, a political conceit. No, they can't allow the arts to flourish unless it's just this one way. That's not art. That is the death of art, and they killed it. And they're killing it, and don't see any problem with that. But that's their own contemporary problem. It's not the problem of the world that knows in a deep personalized sense. Like all my very good friends in Central Asia, all my good friends, I wave to you. You hear me. Isn't that wonderful? It's like an Alpine or Tibetan horn just billowing through the canyons. That kind of wake-up call for the world to get rid of those kilesas and depersonalize the situation. And you will have good causality, scientific causality, ethical, moral causality, health, mental health promoting causality. It's so potent. They called it the penicillin module. It just eliminates those sicknesses by self-awareness and body training and repetition. And it works. You fat people, there are diets that work. And you mentally ill people, there are ways of thinking and practicing that will keep you fit and trim and marvelous, but not all the time, because we have old age, sickness, and death here. But it helps you mitigate those things too. So there's really only upsides, even if it's minimal. Like, I'm not promising the moon, because it's you that makes it happen, but you just start off small, and then the more you put into the skill of cultivation, well, the more you get out of it, don't you? Which carries over to the psychological dimension, which is so important. It's more important than the physical dimension, especially today. People out there, they're healthy as hell, but they're crazy. See, comedy routine. I sometimes get too seriously, which is why I bring in comedy, because the seriousness is not the middle path. The closeness of seriousness is to ill will, isn't it? I have to take this seriously. I'm fighting against the elements, right? The wind wants to blow me off of the sail, and actually it just did. I fell into a billowing sail at high seas, and lightning struck, in 5 different directions. And I thought, I'm going to die. I have to fight back. But how? Well, only skillfully, not throwing punches. First, I had to hold on for dear life. And I did what seemed to be for years or lifetimes in cold planets. To put in the right effort in whatever situation you find yourself in. It might be challenging, it might not. It might not be that dramatic. I really hope it isn't. Don't require that from life. But don't avoid the possibility of it. We avoid more of those possibilities than we are afraid to live. So don't be too afraid to live. You'll miss it. You'll crush it. You'll cancel it. Like they canceled fill in the blank, some person, a stage name, a stage act, a marvelous player, spectacular player, a brilliant player. But we don't have those all the time, but you can be the player of your life because it's the only life you've got right now. Greed, ill will, and delusion is against psychological Osho principles. So these are 3 mind poisons that one can be infected with or develop over time, but one can also train oneself to purify oneself to the extent that one can live, I won't say a normal life, but a life that is normalizing in a good way, because that's the causality of doing things in a good way, which is also an ethical and moral way. Even if radicals wanted to question that fact, there were too many people that didn't ask enough questions, and a lot of people had a lot of unnecessary problems and suffering because of that. But we can acknowledge that that happened, like COVID-19. It was a phenomenon, and you can have equivalent phenomenons, and then you can also retire those. So they went back to being able to stroll in public places to get some fresh air, and they didn't have to wear a mask, versus total regulation, as if there was some kind of like flu, some kind of warlike biological agent in distribution, with a numbers game, informational component that kept it very real sounding. So now some people just went off the rails and was like, okay, well, that was terrible. That was an attempt on my life, and I'm never going to get over that. But other people were like, look, this was just some type, who knows what the real reasons were. And some people made money off it, other people lost money. Some people lost their minds. Some people changed the way they were doing things dramatically because they had the time to think some things through, and they ended up making better decisions for themselves, even if that didn't seem so intuitive at the time, which was more the conditioned response to just work every day of the week in whatever employment kind of thing you bumbled into. See, I could start my comedy routine again. See, no, this is not about self-pity. This is not about class animosity. which I do not think are helpful at all. But in order to get through them and over them, you really have to make that transformation and see things in a social lens and less of a personal greed program. It is not good for the rest of society if certain people take too much, which is why there were laws and regulations so that that wouldn't happen. But they seem to have been or are being undermined. But that's not surprising because you can just legislate those things out as they arise. And so look how a political engine can get started again to start reversing a lot of animosity and polarization and securing some cultural, ethical, pragmatic foundations going forward that does not lead to predictably catastrophic results. Or even risks it by 5%, because things like that you don't get to play with as far as getting them right and wrong. We don't have time for that. Imagine if they did that in a hospital. Pharmaceutical companies has 2 offers or 3 offers. One of them works, but 3 other, they want to market you to market them to paying customers that will like extend their sickness. Would you do that ethically as a good person? Yes or no? Would the money be more worth it to you? Because that's the equivalent of these political people that did go for the money and do go for the money, and they're in the lobbying game, and if you vote for them, you're going to get nothing but nonsense, which is why the free press, it's a great thing. It is not a bad thing. It is a thing that is necessary for a democracy. Now, some of these people, they might be so ego butthurt that they can't take it, but they put their ego in the game, and if they aren't credible, they don't deserve to be voted in. And that should be a foundational concept of all functioning democracies. And why is it good? Well, it leads to better management for us all versus the craven interests of a few. It's happened before. It can be legislated upright. But of course, wouldn't it be nice if people would cooperate with a restructuring rather than just play loggerheads, which doesn't really help any good party, because that's something they wouldn't want to see happen anyway for good people, because they're not good people, are they? How can we say that? Well, the results aren't good. That's it. It's that neutral. So can you admit that? If you can, you can change your point of view, can't you? So the perspective, imagine the thought, the weather today is not as good as it was 10 days ago. You're making comparisons like that, and you're not living in the moment where, yes, it might be drizzling, but that drizzle weather, which is very gray and hovering around 0, that's rather sobering, isn't it? It has a stark kind of energy to it, doesn't it? It's somewhat invigorating on some level, because you are sort of close to death in a way, because the conditions are, at least 99% of people would consider them to be hospitable, at least. Something you should bring an umbrella and some rain gear to. But wouldn't it be a shame if you're just thinking that the whole time you're in one of those situations, in one of those weather patterns, and your mind is stuck in the past 7 days ago, what you would have done if the sun was shining and it was, 20 degrees Celsius, like 80 degrees Fahrenheit? What would you do then if everything was perfect? Just see, you can think about that. Like, that's actually a wholesome thing to ponder. Especially when you're there, pondering that you were pondering that, and now that you're there. But you don't have to be there. You can just stay and be there with your imagination. I think a lot of people are going too much. They're too egoically primed, so they go also in wrong directions, like guppies of fish, into bad schools of thought or bad industries, or our velocity is too fast, so we can't navigate all of these very rapid changes, socially, economically, politically, however else. But that's always been life, hasn't it? How many of you were alive during the Vietnam War? I'm sure a lot of people were really down about that. So why can't we count our blessings instead? Are you dead yet? Who's that? Oh my goodness. Could it be? Did you look at your watch? 2 minutes yet to live? You're going to choose the wrong thing, the cowardly thing. You're going to choose someone else's opinion over your own, over how about this, no view? Can you just open that window and let some fresh air in? Or is it really jammed shut? You just can't look at yourself as a self, as a thing called I. Just for a moment, just abstractly, what if it's wholesome to have just gallons of metta that you've accumulated due to directed practice versus gallons of ill will? That is very easily what could have developed without cultivation, because it's not normal, or common or vulgar to do that. It's superhuman to have the good and to filter out the bad, and to do it consistently, systemically, repetitively, unwaveringly. You don't let these thoughts crawl like flies over your face. You shoo them away. You blow them away. Just like a mosquito in the jungle. And at some point you have a very fine netting or situation or fragrance or position, because positionality isn't fixed. You come to a location with certain vistas and qualities and powers, also perceptional and healing powers, expressive, expansive, energizing power, because of that purification process. Because a mind without kilesas is a paradise versus a landscape, a micro-environment littered with them, crawling with them, seeping with them, oozing with them, burning with them. Such defilements, who would want any of that back? If you had cleared up your microenvironment, doesn't matter how many bags or whatever would blow into your zone that you couldn't remove with the quickness and without any aversion whatsoever, and live in a relatively miraculous natural landscape. Would you not? Could you not? Is it impossible? So think of the metaphor of that. It really is about that. It is about the psychology. It is about psychological health. It's about mental health. It's about individual health. And it's about social health as well. That all of us interact with each other wholesomely and don't do unwholesome things. For your own sake and for the sake of those around you. It's called mutual respect, isn't it? Dignity, civility, and respect. So you're against those things, I would reconsider that. But of course, do be pragmatic, because this dimension is far from ideal, and yet it is not terrible, is it? It's not terrible individually, and it need not be socially. And do you see how the things go hand in hand, that you have to be of high moral and ethical caliber in order to ensure fiduciary services for other responsible people that have a lot of other things to do than complain about comedy. Coming back to the practice for a moment, just think of your feelings, right, as something that you can be aware of, that you can get in the practice of becoming aware of, and then sorting wholesome from unwholesome, according just to the three realms. It's so simple: greed, ill will, delusion. But greed can be desire, right? Want, I want this, I want that. Or the opposite: I don't want this, I don't want that. That's aversion. Ugliness, yes. Why people slow down on the highway, they're attracted to ugliness, but don't look. That's the superhuman thing to do. See, Nietzsche looked into all of his annoyances, and well, did he not find them? And we found them too. But we did not find the way past and through them over much, because he kept an academic critic's mind with him rather than the wholesome from unwholesome, and dare I say simplistic mind. See, it has a Zen kind of simplicity to it. Your house is not cluttered at all. You have the things you require, you don't require much. And in fact, you even create micro austerities just to take a few more moments doing something like opening a can instead of having it done in a millisecond. Using perhaps a prototype you've been working on, but you don't have to go that far. You can see the metaphor of it. Just a tool to open up things that you had canned inside, but sniffing it, if it's no longer good, throwing it away into the infinity of nothingness. Sunyata. The Eckert module gets switched on top of that, though. So it's not just a garbage disposal unit, it's a purifying device. It's like an ionizer for the air, but it's a miraculous one. It just zaps everything down to the microscopic level. Just for a fraction of a second, but it stuns everything. And a lot of them don't get energized, quite the opposite. Just little flashes, sometimes like 10. Zap, 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 zap. And then all of a sudden nothing's there. There's nothing flying around as far as thoughts go, because you're recalibrating at nothing with prayerful meditation. Reapproaching life without them. Being advised, they're in the area here. This ill will, based on it could be very convincing variables right now. Very convincing variables. The person you've told not to do this does it again and again. Type of infuriating. But, dear brothers and sisters, should you succeed, all the way down to 2 minutes to live, but let's say you instantaneously at some point do not get aggravated by aggravating things, well, then you have achieved a state of health and dynamic adaptability that many would be quite satisfied to have, even for just 1 minute. So, step by step, work on getting there, like buying a little lottery ticket every day, so that you can tinker with your own prototype until you start experiencing things like that on a frequent, regular, natural kind of basis, because it's a part of you. It is you. You don't think the way you thought before. You don't hate the clown, the philosopher, the same, quite the opposite. You're in love with the good things, and it loves you back. Brahma loves you back. This realm loves you back. However you want to see that, it gets you back to that blessed mental health that we also compassionately deserve. That we could at least triumphantly say that the fever has broken, at least for the next 5 minutes. Hallelujah. So yes, renewing gratitude. So I like to say gratitude, but see, even that could be misunderstood in a materialist concept, like that's something you should have in a materialist sense, instead of, no, you need to cultivate that. And that could be during long, harsh periods of time where it's not easy to cultivate that. It could be storms, it could be droughts, it could be stampedes of animals trampling about. Herds of animals, they're known to do massive destruction to the environment. Are they terrible living creatures? Are the farmers terrible? Is it really terrible? What's so terrible about it if there's enough room for everyone to do what they want or not what they want? Because there's no compunction to do anything with anyone for any reason whatsoever, other than the barest of civilities, dignities, and respect, and not even anything above that that one would feel would be required based on one's station or position or whatever else, which, if all things be told, is just changing forms and conditions. There can be excellent, legendary restaurants that get crappy management and the thing gets run into the ground and out of business. There's nothing special about mismanagement. There's nothing special about ill will, greed, or delusion. Nothing special. It's very normal. Too normal. It's way too common for superhuman sensibilities. But at the same time, these are things that humanity have been working through, at least some of them, very diligently and successfully and skillfully, with right view and right effort, but not too much. Right? Not being nice to just any old people for any old reason because they're there, because, changing forms and conditions. Here today, gone tomorrow. It can happen. It's happened all over the world. The world's a lot more dynamic, and let it be more dynamic and less, how shall we say, locked in or static for any type of reason, economic, social, socioeconomic, political, psychological, or what have you. So have you put yourself into an identity box? Well, get out of it with no self. Fade whatever corny self you think you have. Your birthday is not relevant. That you can open cans is not relevant. That you can type on a computer is not relevant. None of that's relevant. But skillful practice is relevant. High ethics, morality, speech, hygiene, right? Fitness, nutrition, it all belongs together. There's not one part where you can say, well, I'm going to neglect my mind while my body grows strong. I'm just going to watch any old thing that is thrown on a screen because some people decided I should see it. But maybe you shouldn't be looking around so unconcernedly, because getting rid of things you've seen is harder to do once you've seen them, which is why you should curate your microenvironment, including any type of sewers to globos or globalism or global culture. But at the same time, being somewhat accessible to some things just through a various bunch of filters that you mind. You don't necessarily trust others to mind it for you, especially if there's an ideological component that is anthropologically questionable and or unethical that is today common or considered to be the going a narrative by a bunch of know-it-alls that might not know everything that they think they know, kind of thing. So, oh yes, my comedy routine for a second. How do you get such a disinformational component in your systems if you don't have the pseudo-intellectuals and dogmatists to go along with them, especially young people that have been culturally revolutionized into thinking that they know things better than older people? Very dangerous and reckless and conceited kinds of know-it-alls, aren't they, that just want everything for themselves and are willing to engage in Machiavellian games to not necessarily be the best, but just be the last person standing in a zero-sum game because it's better if people are maligning other people because that's surely going to lead to success in life. Not willing to listen to elders that tell them not to do that. That if they could just go back in a time machine, they would tell themselves not to do that because they wreck their lives doing that. But of course, some of them don't ever know or reflect or repent. Their lives are wrecked, and that's why. Smart alecky young people putting the screws to any and everybody, especially elderly people. That's not wise. Not in any culture. Like, again, African cultures, I can go to Africa. Africans don't have a problem with me. Isn't that strange? Like the biggest continent on the planet, they don't have a problem with me. Everything I say, they're like, oh my goodness, this guy, they don't, there's no contradiction. It's not personal. They don't have personal reasons for jamming people up. Again, these are things pulled out of an old cupboard and cobbled together, tied together, duct taped together, glued together. It all fell apart. But they keep trying to put some type of story together on top of it. There's no need for that at all. Things can just move apart in a civilized way. And no harm done. But of course, there can be uncivilized ways of doing things that just perpetuate themselves, if not out of malice, just out of pure stupidity and unskillfulness, ignorance, hindrance, greed, ill will, and delusion. You name it. It could be that too. But it might just be neutral. Like, well, we didn't have a train before, but now that the train rolls through every day for some reason, because perhaps it's transporting cotton, that all the cotton blows off the train because they don't have those coverings that they should have. And so once a day, someone, just to keep the place looking presentable, has to go out and just collect that up. And wouldn't you know it, you can use that cotton for things. And it's very fresh, and it's a win-win kind of situation for the community, the passengers on the train, and the person who picks up the cotton. And maybe they're also remunerated for that as well, and they don't really have much other things to be doing, because they do that and a couple other things, but nothing much. How is that situation in some way offensive to know-it-alls that don't know nothing, that couldn't manage their way out of a paper bag, are essentially unlikable for unethical practices? And it has nothing to do with style or stylistic or historical kinds of contentious reasons at all. That's just a fabrication. That's a delusional, acrimonious fabrication. See, my comedy routine starts automatically again. We can apply this to relationships as well. Ladies, you do this all the time when you're angry, when you want to cause a fight. This is what you do, or at least some extremely unskillful practitioners amongst you, which today has become a normal of decrepitude and ill will. but not in the better circles of the heavenly realms, which luckily is growing bigger by the day, because there are other kinds of examples of women that put in an above average effort to free their minds from the kilesas, but also not to tell other people pedantically what to do, that know an infinitude more than they do or ever will. That has never come across in any kind of society as accomplished. So if you've been guilty of doing it, shame on you and stop doing it. Then you're a different person. Next week, perhaps everyone forgot about that. But if you stay on that path, that is the path to destruction. And who would want that for you? Not me. I don't like to see people in wheelchairs because they've had terrible accidents, but I do understand some are avoidable. And if I could have told them, hey, don't do that, and it would have saved them that, I would tell them that. Absolutely. Or do you not believe that, so I shouldn't tell you that? Okay. Why would you think that? Could it be delusion again? No, but they scream and get emotional. I was promised so much. I had such high expectations and they were dashed, and now I have a reason for having a chip on my shoulder. No, you don't. What you have is kilesas. You have some bad experiences, and you're producing a causality of badness that will become worse for you unless you put in the practice, the work, the effort, the right view, and get yourself, your body and mind fit and trim in top working order with good nutrition, good exercise, good hygiene, and a good attitude. Smile, but not at everyone, okay? But maybe not at the people you think. How about the working men and women of your neighborhood, country, civilization, you name it. How about also those that aren't working? Why not give them the benefit of the doubt? But not all of them, okay? Like, just be a little bit more down to earth and not rushing around, because you don't have to do that. But if you feel like you're forced to do that, then stop feeling forced to do that. You want to cry about high expectations? Forget about it. Expectations are delusional. But if your mind is stuck in the past or in the future, and it's comprised of ill will, greed or craving or desire, or the reverse of that, aversion, disdain, not liking, wanting to become, not wanting to become, right? All of those pitfalls, the future, anxiety, then no, you're not attractive. You're not super normal. You're below normal to normal, or bad. And things are getting worse because people are not listening to voices like these, and they're listening to just horrifically misguided and stupid voices instead. And that's where a lot of this trash culture comes from. And it's completely artificial. It's highly disdainful and aggressive. And it's run by, yeah, you guessed it, the worst people on the planet. Whoever they are, we don't know. Just have to fill in a list, 100 of them, that allowed these things to perpetrate or propagate. But it's not, that's not astrophysics, people. That's really not complicated at all, is it? So whatever culture you've been blasted with, media-wise, if it came out of a screen, it's not real. And if you think it is, and you have vulgarized yourself, you are essentially some kind of neo-barbarian, don't expect any kinds of congratulations, because that's really not an accomplishment, is it? Now someone screams from the back, well, what about you? Like, see, comedy has to do with hecklers, people that really want to improve their mood, which is why they go. But they're essentially miserable people. And if you can't make them laugh, you see, they blame the comedian. Just like they blame the comedian for making them angry, but they're the ones getting angry at a comedian that, in this case at least, is of legendary status. Legendary. Like not even close. Babe Ruth is not on the same plane. The person who redesigned the baseball or bat, all the equipment, right? Built the stadium, the entire drama. 1,000 to 1,000 different versions of it. Booing me, getting angry because of my inability to make him feel happy and good and loved and appreciated. Because, oh yeah, everyone wants to feel that, but you have to feel that. You have to cultivate that within yourself so that you can give it to others eventually, because you have so much of it. It's in abundance. This is not a gimmick. But it takes a lot of work in many cases. How many people have orchards? Well, oh, there's just trees growing here, all this fruit. That took unbelievable amounts of work and time. If you've never done it, you don't know what kind of work goes into planting and maintaining an orchard. What do you know about that? You don't know anything about that. You don't know anything about cultivating the heavenly abodes either, which is why your microenvironments are trashed. The equivalent of heaping piles of garbage stacked and stacked around you, encapsulated in these solidified, petrified cells, these egoic contraptions that you have been smashed into like some kind of hard clay into a form and baked. So if any of you out there feeling very depressed, for example, I know exactly what that's like. Right? That was an old neighborhood of mine, or its equivalent. But I left a long time ago. Long time ago. Don't ever think of that place. But it's a spiritual journey. It's not the changing forms and conditions around you, 2 minutes to live. Don't lose your perspective. At least not that. Raise your eyes just by 1 degree. Because tomorrow you can do the same thing, and again and again and again. Every mind mode, every bow. 56 bows, morning and evening. And in the middle of the day, if that's what it takes. And you will plant that orchard and you will have the abundance, but it is a long process of dedicated cultivation that gets us there, and no other way. But see, you can stand on top of your pile of apples and see the causality behind you, but you can also feel that right now with right practice and right effort. Should you have put yourself in a position to feel it just for 5 seconds by switching all of your thoughts just to the breath, just creating that hairline fissure, but then widening it. Not too much, but not nothing at all either. Like brushing one's teeth. You're just brushing it for 5 minutes once a day. Then maybe twice, right? Then you space it out. And then you belong to the supernormal people that aren't running in and out of the dentist or die of a root canal. At least not that. Like your probabilities are way higher. Then there's oral cancer, there's a bunch of other things. It's one of the most unhygienic places on the body, which is understandable. Food goes in, sticks in different crevices. It's moist, it's warm. You do the math if you know something about microbiology. And yet, are we horrible creatures, or But sometimes it might be good to think of us as horrible creatures so that we don't get overly attached to the human form. If you die, your body is, again, like 2 bags of garbage. Think of a garbage bag. Just something from a butcher shop. Thrown out the back in a dumpster. And it doesn't matter how sexy you think that person is, that you're loving to the moon. That's essentially what it boils down to. If there was an artillery strike, that's what it sort of looks like. People get picked up like litter in plastic bags. Here's another thing about microenvironment practice is, you have to go where the trash is. So if your microenvironment is copacetic, and you should constantly, well, not necessarily constantly be expanding it, but at least in the areas that you traverse, why can't you be a positive influence on the landscape instead of a negative one? Yes, other people are repulsively subnormal and careless and disastrous and criminal, but you aren't, and what was the big deal? They might never return to the human realm. On top of never returning to the city or the street, that they messed up. That's just the one moment they were there. Might be from out of town. So truck drivers, a lot of them are atrocious. Not all of them, mind you, but some of them. But some of them also fix up spots that they stay at because they're generous with their microenvironments that they interact with in a kind of restful, repose-like oasis of not having to hit the gas and dodge obstacles just for 5 minutes. Kind of my moment practice. That is metaphorical, like all of those aggravations you throw in the trash. All of those disappointments, all of those blamings, all of those kilesas, you find them in the most absurd places. And a lot of times it's the absurdest of trash in your mind. But when you find that trash, the physical trash, you feel that correspondence, and you put that in the trash too. So there's a synchronicity, there's congruence between outside practice and inside practice, just on a very small, microscopic, meaningless, absurd level. But it's still meaningful. Just a drop of meaning is in that. When you look at a landscape that has been returned to its holy state, or a better state, or a good state, or a good enough state, it's not going to be perfect. You don't have to lawn mow the grass down to a millimeter. You can just have a natural landscape that's just not filled with trash. Oh my goodness. It's good enough, isn't it? Look at it. When the sun rises and that golden hue on all of that long grass that you didn't have to plant or care about, but's there. And the dew is frozen as the moonlight transitions to sunlight. These are priceless moments. These moments aren't coming back. But our microenvironment was as pristine as possible. And no, it's not neurotic. It's not trying to control things. It's full acceptance that you had zero responsibility for cleaning it up or for trashing it. But you still did the thing, the practice, and had the direct benefits from that in the form of good karma, because it makes you feel good. It does. And that feeling good is something some people don't get. Even if they get paid $1 million, they don't get that. Because other aggravations stamp that out. It robs them. Then they're on to desire. Oh, now I can have this. See, the desires grow. Should you have the capability of satisfying them, then they become dissatisfying at some point. That pickup truck that was good enough? No, if you have $100,000, that's not good enough. And so on and so forth. This is how the human monkey mind destroys people's lives every single day, every single hour of every single day, every single minute of every single day. Unless you put in something more than a baseline effort that most people that normal see, has people losing their minds. That's normal. Losing it, caving in, being angry, being disappointed, being frustrated. That's normal. There's nothing super normal about that. That's normal. But this practice, it's not normal. It's super normal. It's better than normal. But it does require practice. And it does make you feel good. It does not matter what other people think. Oh, this man, he has cleaned up this trash here. What a real pain in the butt. Nobody ever says that's worth a damn. That's worth even an iota of a damn would get jammed up about that. It's a statement. What is it? If he doesn't think so, how's it a statement? Maybe that statement is in the third realm called delusion, and absolutely filthy, hateful, retrograde people have it in spades and can think themselves up anything that doesn't fit the bill to be obnoxious, because that's essentially what they manifest. Kilesas in externals, not just in internals, which has negative causality, which is a sliding scale, into wars, right? That's a complete trashing of a city or landscape, is it not? Industrial grade trashing of landscapes and lives. That's where ill will can lead you. And then not just so-called bad people get killed, everybody gets killed. Good people, bad people, people in between, people trying to practice, but fighting flamethrowers and bats from outer space in the form of social, economic conditions that have been driven off the rails intentionally in our time. Yeah, so give yourselves all a clap on the back if you've not just maintained a modicum of sanity, dignity, and civility, but that you expand that. Even if it's just by a micrometer today, it's better than nothing. And if you have to find meaning in picking up trash, God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. But of course, it doesn't just have to be that. And there really is no compunction to make meaning in order for this life to be meaningful. You can jump straight past the middle path into some kind of frenzy of activity that is just like jumping into a relationship after you are coming out of one that failed because you're off balance. You're demanding too much. You're expecting too much. Expect too much from life, perfect setup for massive amounts of disappointment. Massive amounts. Amounts that will kill you just even in the smallest concentrations of it. But you're lackadaisical about matters like that. Psychology doesn't matter. It's all about physicality. I can do 100 push-ups. And you? Is that the type of contest? Make meaning in this realm? Is that the side you're on? So go ahead, trash your environment if you think that's going to do it for you. Try it out, but do it in an absurdist way so that you can distill some meaning from it and not just in a slipshod kind of sloppy a daily, habitual, unthinking way, customary way. Don't do that. That would be cheating. Do it intentionally. Be aware of what you're doing when you trash your environment with your thoughts, with your expectations, with your enmity, with your desires or your aversions or your delusions. Do it intentionally and be aware during that process. And then tell me, I don't know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what you think. If you think that way, you're delusional. But we can be that way for a while. Give yourself time to change your mind. Please give yourself time. Just 5 minutes to change your mind. Just 5 minutes and 5 minutes and 5 minutes and 5 minutes and 5. And never stop changing your mind. Someone wrote in and said, "You said we're in purgatory, is that right?" Thank you. Yeah, that is right. I believe that this dimension has been called purgatory and is in fact purgatorial. And that perspective shift is very, 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 very pragmatic and beneficial because it takes off a lot of illusory expectations about this realm that can cause enormous amounts of unnecessary suffering, especially if you're expecting to have a super happy, wholesome, rational kind of life. In this dimension, that is, dare I say, impossible. You see, I just nip it in the bud. It's impossible. I'm not saying that means people are doomed to unwholesomeness. No. Human beings, mammalian creatures, have monkey minds. It's very understandable. Watch that monkey mind like a hawk, by the way. Like a real hawk. Imagine monkeys in the tree. The hawk, there's the monkey mind. Shut it down. Okay, we're fallible creatures. Everybody knows it. To be human is to err. I didn't create that saying. I just read it and it resonated with me as it did millions and millions and millions and millions of other literate people. But anyway, there is this tendency of religious people to bright side things and use religion as a vehicle for bright siding, when in fact that's not really what religion was invented for, developed for. And the Catholic Church, again, we have theologists, and then we have the practice that gets trickled down to the parishioners, and it's sort of a dumbed down version for lay people in Christianity, but also Christian theologians dealt with the concept of purgatory. I did not invent that word. Where is it coming from? Well, it's of Christian origin, but let's not say Christian origin, let's just say it's known within certain Christian circles, but not so much in other Christian circles. See, it's been sort of airbrushed out of it. But it needs to be reestablished, like, oh, wait, we're not in heaven, we're not in hell, so where are we? Oh, wait a second, we're in purgatory. That's right, a between realm, a place of sorting, a place of trial and tribulation, a place of suffering, both real and imagined. Imagine that. Does that sound more accurate to you? How can you skip over that part and rush right into heaven after death kind of thinking when it's really about the here now that matters? and not making this place worse than it is, but not doing that by not having higher expectations for it, if that makes any sense. Which is to say, having realistic expectations, which means having a baseline for much more gratitude than you might have. Instead of high expectations, you have, let's say, realistic expectations. Hey, I'm not sick today, I'm not dead today, and I might not be as old as I thought being this old would be, because I can still do a few things. I'm not running marathons, but I can read a book and drink some excellent tea that has taken years to refine that kind of process, and I do enjoy it, especially the mountain-fed spring water and the ritualistic preparations that are so meaningless to Paduges, but not to me, because I know that time is precious, and I make it precious with absurdist details according to Paduges, but not to me. And therein lies a meaningfulness gap that I need not explain or justify or run after, because it's really there when I take that, when I smell the aroma of the tea and I prepare it in my special way, and I have my special cup and my special place. Perhaps it's a view overlooking a mountain range at specific times during moonlight, or a sunrise, or other things that I just pulled out of thin air to just maybe squeeze one drop of meaning out of a purgatorial existence. Then you can see how skill can be brought into it. Okay, wait a second. I'm living above the Arctic Circle. Isn't that sort of valuable information? Like, all of a sudden I know a lot of things. Like, well, the summers might be hot, but they'll be very short. Winter, there's long periods of darkness and cold. You see how you can already start planning? Well, knowing you're in purgatory gives you that too. It really does. After the initial shock and awe and surprise and disappointments blow over, you're like, well, okay, what does this mean? And then you can start articulating a plan that doesn't involve high expectations, but also doesn't make it worse than it needs to be. See, if we awfulize purgatory, we land in hell realm, like mental, psychological states. And we can see this in small things, but we can also scale this up into worldviews or doomerism by saying, well, this dimension is just not worth living, it's not perfect, it's not good enough. Instead of saying, no, this is a very important place, it's also a very fortunate place, because it is not hell, it's purgatory. It's a between realm. So we can get worse. We can see people getting just worse and worse and worse social conditions as well, bad individual conditions, the equivalent of multiple stink bombs and nerve gases being exploded in social spaces at this time, psychological stink bombs, enmity between men and women coming from the female side, which is really strange, but is sort of part of a vulgar side of humanity, but not the upper echelons, mind you, but the lower realms, oh yeah, there's a lot of that. Doesn't really conform to a happy, clappy, slappy social narrative that's foisted off on people today. But boy, is it real for anyone who may have encountered that. But over-focusing on that, dwelling on people, places, and things, especially of the past, that's not where the heavenly abodes are they? Well, no. So how do you stop yourself doing it? Well, watch that monkey mind like a hawk. If it starts doing it, stop it doing it. Switch to the breath if you don't have anything else to think of, and most of the times you don't, especially if it's unwholesome. But we like to cling to our thoughts. This is important. I wouldn't be thinking this if it wasn't important. Well, no, that could be Mara throwing you a monkey wrench. King of the sense realms, by the way. But that does not mean that God does not exist. It means that Mara is sort of the taskmaster, the tester of souls. And you can pass this test. That's the good news. The bad news is you can fail the test. And if you fail the test successively, your life gets worse. It becomes more delusional. It becomes more dissatisfying. It becomes more complicated, more irritating, more aggravating. You get sicker. You age faster, right? You die faster. It's just statistics. You conduct immoral behavior, your chances of venereal disease is drastically higher. All you ladies out there, maybe 10, 20, 30 times higher. Well, once you let some type of super bacteria loose in body cavities, your chances of survival or having a good life, free of unnecessary suffering, it's very low, maybe 5% chance. That's why there was morality in the past, not because people were pedantic dogmatists like the ideologues of today who claim that religion it was all nonsense and that their version of progress is that they can just think themselves in some kind of vacuum and take positions that don't make any sense. But do hurt a lot of people who are dumb enough to believe them, even if they deny that is the case and also falsify the information or suppress the real information. But they're on your side, ladies. That's what they say. They really are very emotional about that. If you just try to question them on one or two things, they'll call you a woman hater as a woman. Imagine that. You're a woman. You hate other women because you're telling them that being of sound mind and body and religiously practicing moral behavior is better for you. You're a hater, they say. They will cut you out if they can. They will defame you, push you out of the group. No, this one, counter-revolutionary. So yeah, we have despicable, horrible kinds of disseminations of disinformation, and the results of that are also bad karma, bad causality. People hear bad things, they do bad things, they get bad things. That's it. They don't hear, yeah, you should find a good man and take some time and do that very cautiously, and then stick with them and support them till the damn end. And if he does die prematurely, then do the same thing with the next man, but not before that. And don't lead to his demise. Like that basic kind of download, that's been jammed for the new generations. But now you just got it. So if you implement it, you will have the good results from good strategy and good behavior, good moral behavior. Do not be playing chumps out there, because you will end up getting played yourself in one way or another. You cannot juggle multiple relationships. It is a recipe doomed to failure. It's not psychologically possible. It's not really physically possible. And if it is physically possible, it's not physically advisable because of the potential health effects. It's just that simple. Making complicated things simple in purgatory, it's a great practice. What do I need? A roof over my head? What does that look like? A shed? Well, all of a sudden I don't need to have $1 million mortgage, do I? Don't need to be waking up at the crack of dawn and working myself ragged because I could potentially live in a shed with a wood stove, and that little variable of purgatory has been solved for me. Even if I'm living above the Arctic Circle, that can work. You can dig it into the side of a hill or something like that. You have to look into insulation more. So, the baseline, purgatory. Yeah, we live in purgatory. Didn't nobody tell you that? Did you at least attend Catholic Mass once or twice? They sort of glossed over that part. See, they say that if you die, you can go to purgatory. And there, you're punished for your misdeeds in this life. And once your karmic debt is paid, then you can reach the heavenly abode. So, sort of a mix and match and something like that. It's a lot better to say, no, this dimension is purgatory. And if you die and you're a bad person, you will potentially not come back to this place. You will continue into the hell realms. On the other hand, if you're a good person and you're into spiritual practice and your spirit is so trained that even in your sleep, you're skillful, that if you were to die, you can already see that you would be some kind of being that is still practicing without a body. And so why wouldn't you have heavenly results if your spirit has been so trained? You see how that all sort of fits together? And let us not forget, Christianity was 500 long centuries, 5 centuries after there was the Buddha phenomenon that just blew everybody's mind in antiquity. But they garbled these metaphysical ideas. You see, in Buddhism, this realm, it was never considered heaven. And it wasn't necessarily considered hell either. So it's a between realm. That's what they believed and believe to this day. And you see, there's synchronicity there. There's accuracy there. There's pragmatism there. And there's a bringing of your expectations down to a baseline. Like, I could be living well, yes, but because this realm is full of changing forms and conditions, and the king of the sense realm has a lot of sway here, anything bad could happen for any reason. And if you have prepared yourself psychologically and spiritually, then you're going to still have the potential for positive karma or causality, despite the immensely challenging circumstances at times in purgatory. That's why we come back to Dante. You know, Dante was like, it was sort of a story of his life that he worked out in a literary way. Some say it was based on old Buddhist models as well. But his reflections on just the devilishly misguided people that he encountered in his life was essentially a representation of purgatory, or this dimension. This bardo is purgatory. If you readjust your baseline to that level, all of a sudden you can start thinking about things differently and in a less, let's say, foolishly optimistic way. That is not to say that you cannot achieve heavenly heights here. But it's not the norm by a long shot. And it requires skill and effort. And if you fail, if you take the wrong path, if you misinterpret mythology or other religions or this religion or that religion, you run the potential of not just landing in hell realms, but eternally ending up there and never, ever, ever even being reborn into purgatory. So that should just give you a couple of things to work with that a lot of so-called Christians do not have, or it's garbled. It's sort of a gobbledygook, just thrown together kind of metaphysics that doesn't make a lot of sense. But they have the terms and the concepts, it's just nobody's really put them together. But the Buddha did. So there's a lot of richness and a lot of openness about questions that we will never get a definitive answer on. But comparing the insights of others gives us a somewhat more realistic picture just based on certain basic facts like old age, sickness, and death that are undeniable. No one here has ever survived life in this realm that we know of scientifically. Doesn't that tell you something? Isn't that convincing on some level for this hypothesis that it's a between realm, between birth and death kind of thing? How far off is that in the form of a hypothesis? So instead of fighting that or saying, well, then all is lost, no, all is not lost if this is purgatory. This is the arena. This is the training center. This is where things go down. This is where things go sideways. This is where good people shine and bad people destruct. Where bad people delude themselves and good people become awakened. Why can't you see it that way? I also want to emphasize the point that just because you're here does not mean you're doomed, not at all. This is a place where you can claim personal responsibility and agency and improve your spiritual condition despite all of your past lives. You can improve, you can reduce the amount of time that you spend in purgatory. This is the theory, at least. Based on your actions right now, your mindfulness right now. What are you thinking about right now? Are you out of the hell realms right now? Have you purified yourself right now? Have you washed your hands? Have you washed your body? Are you engaged in wholesome activity? What about the 5 precepts? No? Well, now's the time to practice before it's too late, because our time here is limited, if you haven't noticed yet. It is. You're a young person. There's still no guarantee you'll be alive in the next 2 minutes. My principle, 2 minutes to live, my saying, it's true for you too. I have seen so many young people die in my time. Don't take your life for granted. Don't think, oh, I've got 2 years. I'll do it then. I'll straighten myself out. Don't think that way. Every mind moment is an opportunity to at least not make your suffering worse, not to over exaggerate bad things, and to mitigate the bad and to defeat it at the point of contact where you can, even if that means disengagement. I love a disengagement. I love to disengage. Don't need to re-engage. You will not lose a martial arts contest if you do not engage in one. Do not engage in activities that cause harm. Psychological activities, imaginative activities, physical activities, or any kinds of activity. Reclaim your agency in purgatory. One of the many good things about goodness is that on a certain level, if you learn to appreciate it, it has such an enthralling, deeply enthralling and rejuvenating and replenishing aspect. So many aspects to it that once you've cultivated it, like fine wine, I don't want to say it's like that, but some people have made that equivalence, that one is in a very good mood and the skills are very good, and it's not dependent on the alcohol, it's that effervescence. See, that's why I wouldn't want to make that false distinction, because I think people from the past also underestimated the threat of the stuff, which led to bad causality. Just as a neutral side note, people picked up smoking in excess in different times, in different epochs, in different places, and the people there died quicker of cancer, and that's a statistical fact. And where alcoholism got out of control, it led to a lot of downfall and heedlessness and loss. Especially for the individual practitioner that essentially loses their life by becoming addicted to a substance that is self-harming. But they sell it and make a profit, and other people lose their money and their minds and their bodies, and society loses some of its greatest poets, literary people, physicians. It doesn't really discriminate. Housewives, right? Bored people in general, out of work people, not necessarily in the best places of life kind of people. So it's not just about the alcohol, it's about the lack of practice. That's number one. But yeah, after you realize it's very harmful, you should implement mitigating strategies to somehow trick whatever addiction you're dealing with. See, in your case, it might not be that. It might be pills or chemicals or other things. Opium. Opium is a killer that the Buddha knew. The Buddha knew it very well. In fact, it's very probable that as an Indian prince, he also made experiences in the sensual realms that were not conducive to unnecessary suffering. And so he had to take that journey to find a way through all of those purgatory-like apparitions such as greed, ill will, and delusion. So that can manifest itself in others, but you really just have to stop manifesting it within yourself, and also stay on top of that practice so that it really is a lived reality, because you're not putting up with mind poisons, which is what the kilesas have been described, not by me. See, don't think myself or my ego or my immense amount of suffering should have anything to do with the definition that was written before I was ever born, before you were ever born, before there was a you and yours and me and mine. A pure conscious being free of self that could see Also troubling things with neutrality, because what for kinds of suffering or responsibility can one take upon oneself, or should one take upon oneself, unskillfully I might add, if they do not belong to the life of the practitioner? Because why should they have to do with the life of a practitioner that cultivates such Malthusian and misguiding and hateful narratives assiduously out of their minds, with nail clippers if they have to, or little nails, or their own hands, to be free of defilements, such as something sticking to your leg that is causing you irritation, that you would deal with in the same way that I describe psychologically, but Padujas pretend like that dimension doesn't exist, when that is the determinate dimension, is it not? Once you have basic mammalian essentials such as shelter, clothing, yes, be compassionate, you're an animal, as well as a human being. Would you kick your dog right now? Why are you kicking yourself about something that happened 10 years ago? See, people get into bad habits of mind, which is why it really helps to become aware of what you're thinking about, so that you can cultivate bad things out of your mind, such as a voice screaming at you that you're not doing enough, but you really are doing enough. But you still feel this, you're hearing this voice, and you don't know how to shut it off, kind of situations that mammalians can get into, because that's what the monkey mind is all about. Watch it like a hawk. Scare it like a hawk. Back down to the lower branches, no matter what's going on, whatever drama it is in your life right now, whatever Kalisa is strangling you or dominating you right now. That's what you're dealing with. Nothing else, no. Purgatory doesn't have a rationale necessarily, other than unnecessary suffering and the cessation of that in a superhuman way. If you can bring your own personal responsibility and dedication and insight and finesse and subtlety to the game to make it possible. But it's you, yes, you and your perfectionist hostilities in some cases, but also potentialities to find a perspective that suits you in purgatory, and yet does not throw oneself away as a living being and miss this opportunity to put in some cases, in my case at least, I assume, but of course one could overestimate these things, infinite amount of positive karma based on some of what some people would term to be banal acts of extreme courage and determination in the face of some of the most horrific occurrences that have ever happened on this planet, let alone modern time. To extend this kind of practice to others suffering under vastly different variables that they're personalizing, that is keeping them in their own personal hells that they need not be in, but now they know that there's a key and there's a way and that they can do it. And I give each and every last one of them permission to do it, especially when they don't give it to themselves. And then they have to think, who has the greater authority and why? So here's another little factoid about purgatory. Hell-bound people, they're not your responsibility, right? You can tell them, like, look, you are going in the wrong direction, and if they really do matter enough for you to say that. But if they've already turned or made their decisions for their life, like so many of your friends and relatives and essentially everybody does do, and that leads to causation, which might be horrendous for them in terms of unnecessary suffering, but they just don't get it and continue not to get it, and you could vicariously suffer with them. But see, we focus on vicarious joy instead, but only of those select things that do deserve it, such as a little puppy having a great day and playing with a ball. We can see that, we can feel that, we can know that that is joy, that we can feel vicariously. Why not? Anything in purgatory that is skillful. Please use it to your advantage to improve your mood by any means possible, especially when it's some kind of trick. When all that charging bull comes and you pull out your red cape and it just flies straight past you with such skillfulness. Do that. Don't take those horns. Don't take it head on. Let those troubles dance around you and you dance with it, but don't get yourself hurt about changing forms and conditions. Don't do that. Everything they throw at you, it just needs to be 3 seconds ahead, 3 mind moments ahead or past that point. And then you're free of that thrust or whatever it might be. Twist. Ever watch bulls try to gore someone? They are not playing around. Those bodies, they're big. They are strong. Those horns, they are sharp. It's as real as it gets. People can and do get hurt. It's real life. It's not a Nerf game. But if you're having a Nerf game, please enjoy that. But think of it as training, but also don't get yourself hurt. But also, that's not the point of life. We don't get through life without suffering. We don't, see? That's that reality lens. We tell you that right up front. But we also say, you're suffering, it's not special. Okay? It's just what it is, suffering. A megaton component of purgatory. Like, it's sand at the beach kind of not specialness here. But people make it special, which is why they suffer so immensely more than is necessary. You see what I'm talking about? Not yet. Maybe in 2 mind moments, all of a sudden, Satori, you awake. Wait a second. What if that's true? What could I do? Can I see it? Can I stop it? Can I bring right effort and right view again and again and again and again and again? Can I do that? How hard is that really? Is that like driving a truck or pushing it if it's out of gas? No. It's just changing your mind at the right moment, catching yourself, being aware. Wait, that does sound achievable, doesn't it? What if that does work? Could that be the key? What do you think? Purgatory, 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 purgatory. Say it 4 times, say it slow. You see, also look into the word purge, purgatory. What is it that's so powerful about the radical acceptance of that concept, that insight, that truth? If you see it that way in a metaphysical sense, your place in the universe, doesn't it sort of more accurately describe this place than a happy, slappy BS? Yeah, man, be optimistic all the time. And, oh yeah, happiness is our baseline. Oh, by the way, this is purgatory. How wise would that be? How achievable if that was your baseline? Well, it is achievable if you have the right perspective and psychology and put in right effort and right view, essentially. But that wouldn't be to gloss over the reality of this dimension or the realities, just like the authorities often get it so horribly wrong in so many different ways, don't they? But what if that's sort of part of the process of this place, which is to be extremely annoying, at least at times, because it sorts the deluded out or leaves them here on a planet that is doomed to become a dead planet, just like the body is doomed to become a dead body at some point. What if this is sort of a prison? And the beings trapped here have a limited amount of time to cause mayhem and to exercise authority in this way until the process has played itself out. It's no longer needed, even if that is a yojana of time, another time unit that you, as a neo-barbarian, most likely have absolutely no concept of, because civilization is not linear. High and advanced civilizations have gone extinct here, and that's just how should one put it? A materialist fact. If we consider materialism to be one of the lowest, most vulgar, and misguided philosophies of all time, even they cannot deny that fact. That higher civilizations than this one certainly did exist, at least in psychological terms. You know, that index, like, what do they call it? Quality of life, but not just quality of life, the perception of quality of life. Where are the materialists now? They could have a survey. That survey, they could produce it, but look at it, changing forms and conditions. Neo-barbarism leads to massive declines in well-being to the point of driving large numbers of people insane. Materialism, but our production levels have gone up 0.2%, so yeah, that's progress, isn't it? So yeah, getting caught up in worldly rationalizations is, could it be a Mara-like activity, Mara-mind activity? Can cultural norms become Mara-like and appear to be better than old models? But could it be? Is it delusional, illusory, misleading? Could that fit the description of that personality that just keeps coming up over and over and over and over again when you dig into these matters? But of course, a water bug culture kind of lack of depth of any kind does not do that. Because it's about materialism, objects, Shiny objects, more, greed, 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 greed. That's the way to happiness, fool. Didn't you know? That's what the big eaters believe. The big brain big eaters, they're into that, lock, stock, and barrel. So get on board there, buddy. Forget about steaks. How many hot dogs can you eat in a day? Well, it turns out that morbidly obese people can eat a whole lot, can't they? But that never would make the practice healthy. Now would it? But they feel themselves to be right. So who are you to tell them anything? It's a selective truth, right? My truth doesn't have to be your truth. Wah, 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 wah. There you are, back in the Looney Tunes. So no, you're not going to find enlightenment in circuitous kinds of samsaric reasoning processes and handstandings and human pretzelings. There's really no booby prize that you get for all of that nonsensical work and activity and explanations and soul searching. Now that really is pointless if you're looking there for meaning. But let's not forget, purgatory has a meaningful side to it, very meaningful side, a very horrifying side, but that makes it somewhat even more meaningful in a way. People stand up to attention when you talk about purgatory because it really does have a mix of heavenly and hellish elements. Which makes it so dang dynamic, doesn't it? The worst and best people in the world together, at least in proximity to one another, to have the ability to hear the other's words and rantings and ravings in many cases. That's different. That's not as monotone as the hell realms, for example, where it's the equivalent of someone just scratching their fingernails across a blackboard for infinity. That's not so dynamic. It's pretty boring, all things told. Now, some bad people, because they have wrong view, would think, well, the heavenly realms, they must be so boring, right? That satisfaction and contentment, forget that stuff, man. Give me some anger and greed and delusion, please. Yeah, no. That's not what the heavenly abodes are about. Okay. It's the good things. Like, you want a good car? Yeah, you don't want a bad car, do you? You want a good car. Well, heavenly abodes is like, yeah, a good place. Mentally. Now, you can't really say physically. I think that might be pushing it. But what you feel, the metaphor of physical wellness, i.e. the absence of pain, or perhaps the light, effervescent feeling of exuberance or enthusiasm is there. But yeah, not too much, obviously. Because that would be bad, wouldn't it? Then you're coming back to your cool hell realms. They're so edgy, right? They're just annoying and misguided, essentially. No, we're neo-barbarians. We're into that kind of appearance of coolness that doesn't deliver ever. because we're so dang cool. Cue the neo-barbarian, the misguided padooge. Yeah, don't be like that. But also don't get too down on purgatory. Comedy routine. Hey, purgatory is a great place for comedy, isn't it? Now, it's true that it's a great place for comedy that doesn't pay. Great comedy doesn't pay in purgatory. But that's pretty funny too, isn't it? That there's such a thing as a barbaric comedy, and that's what people, that's what the moral-minded people pay for. But while excluding the real stuff, look, it was Dante that wrote the Divine Comedy, right? See, this is a lens that I'm just borrowing. I'm borrowing his little telescope and looking through it from time to time, and a kaleidoscope. You should do that too. I think that was the whole point of his thought exercise, but it didn't start with him. He just, because it was a place of learning, that is a place that would have been one of the places where ancient wisdom was to be found, and it does appear like he found it and then expressed it in such a skillful way, did he not? So, perspectionism or perspectivism, there we go. I think there were also some art schools that were called that, or I don't want to associate the term with that, but it's just the philosophical concept of changing your perspective, like a photographer does, right? With that kind of complete neutral professionality, detachedness. Yes, you're not attached even to an outcome. So, see, professionals work for money. At least that's a vulgar understanding of professionality, but there are those people that do it just to do it well. Like good musicians, they're professional because they decided to go pro, because they decided to make it as important as they made it. But that was a decision and a view that very many people have pondered but did not use the right effort and carry through on that with determination, which is the Om Mani Padme Hum connectivity that really does fit together very well, very compact, very hard-hitting, very concise. You can say that within a couple of fractions of seconds, or you can extend it out a little bit, but within 5 seconds you can usually say that or think that even. Thinking is even more of a subtle practice. You don't have to bother anyone. You can also time it with your breath. You can make it expansive, you can bring it in, and you can just do that as a relaxation exercise. I don't know, 15 minutes a day, morning and evening, or maybe interspersed throughout the day depending on your schedule. Some people have this variable workloads, like artists and freelancers, and other people, just people, gig economy people, and so they don't really have a fixed schedule or work that comes in consistently and gives them a kind of stability or boxing in of their lives, kind of thing, which has its disadvantages but also a lot of advantages, especially because of its dynamic kind of nature. That, it sort of does mix things up a little bit. So you might be here, you might be there, you might be waking up at this time, you might be doing that thing, and that you accept the changeability of life, which means accepting setbacks, accepting that not everyone in the world is going to like you or see your value or have something for you, because there's all different kinds of damn people out there, and not all of them are cut out for doing X, Y, Z. So you do have to give yourself a little bit of flexibility in these matters that aren't so straightforward as this dimension. Some people have called it purgatory. So that gives you the metaphysical kind of GPS map coordinate system. It's very pragmatic. Explains a lot of things away, like being deceived and being failable, but accepting failability to an extent, correcting one's behaviors or perspectives, you see. First the perspectives, then the behavior, but you can first bring the behavior down to zero, like do a lot less, have a lot less scheduling, but then devote that time not to just distractions and aversions and attractions and delusions. Devote it to the cessation of those things, or the countering of the desire for those things, and then also the blocking of wrong effort towards those things, or activities that one could put in a Venn diagram relating to those things, because it's a bigger tent than just the one or the other thing. It's a whole bunch of them. The term kalesas, it's plural. That S, that's pretty wide ranging. So you might think you've seen a couple of things, but then there's some things that sneak up on you. It's precisely the thing you're not seeing. Precisely the thing that you're not engaging right effort in. That is perhaps the most challenging thing. But look, it's one day at a time, one maimon at a time. It's not about perfection. It's just about, today I spent 10 minutes less thinking about fill in your variable, XYZ thing that just drives you crazy. And then next day you forgot completely to think about that thing, and then so on and so forth, other things happen, and you've moved on with your life, and you have 90% of your time that isn't structured with meaningful things. You have that structure with meaning as well, without requiring any external inputs. But you're not going to close them off necessarily. You're just going to only interact with externals in a skillful way, and not in any unskillful way. And unskillful people are not interesting people. They're doomed to failure people. You see them. There's roofers out there with the wrong equipment. They're just throwing stuff up. Roofs have been roofed since primitive times. But then there's some crews, they take it very seriously and they don't want to get injured. And they have the right tools, they have the right equipment to carry things. And they do it in a way that they feel is on their level, and they do deliver the results, and they are well paid for that. Or even if they're not well paid, they're paid well enough to continue doing things their way to the best of their abilities. But of course, they might not be married to just any old one position. It's just via changing forms and conditions. For this time, it made sense to do this, but maybe later it will make sense to do something else. And there's really no linear plan to one's life many times because of all of these variables. Bad ones, but also good ones. See, we like to obsess about the bad. Have you ever had like a bad streak? And then you just, at some point, if you've had, or what you perceive to have had, like 10 L's, but you were just focusing on them and not the wins, such as even developing the practice, which seems to be trivial but really isn't, that long term you're investing in psychological and spiritual dividends that break us out of any kind of mental illness or neuroses or discomfort or irritation from time to time, kind of a wholesome practice. It's very beneficial for practitioners, not just the practitioner. It's a social phenomenon as well. Less mentally aggravated individuals worldwide that take full personal responsibility for the state of their mind, which should be under their control. Would they put in the barest of efforts and skill to do so? But for those who are too ignorant, that don't know what that looks like, look, this message is really for them. They have the interest to better themselves in such a way that makes their lives better no matter what happens in this purgatorial realm. That they're best equipped to get through it with the least amount of suffering, right? And the most amount of wisdom. And the most amount of unburdening, because the emphasis is on unburdening, not necessarily accumulating a new skill. It's the skill of unburdening, of pruning, of replanting, but mostly clearing. Such as in procedures where poisons are prevalent, such as the chalasis are. It's sort of an environmental toxification. And so what do? You have to slow down, and then you have to unwind the thing and then figure out, well, what could eliminate the chemical reaction, right? Think more chemistry. Okay, well, if the system is too aggravated, i.e. there's flames coming out of a beaker, you need to add some type of coolant, some nibbana to the situation, to the Bunsen burner. Otherwise, you could set other things on fire, and then, oh my goodness, there was a massive explosion the other day, and it was totally preventable, but has it happened? Did it just happen? Did you just see it? Do you see how dangerous it is to be negligent regarding how one thinks about what and why, and giving yourself, let's say, a discomfort zone, but under conditions that you develop. But of course, there's some people that have some pointers that could help you perhaps try some things out that gives you those different perspectives. That's really like windows in a tower, right? All of a sudden, you were looking in the wrong way. You opened a new window. You just have a fabulous view. It was there the whole time. It was just you were focused on one perspective or another, but not a good one, not a wholesome one. That was it. That was your one mistake, really. And it's a mistake that mammals can make. They make it so often that it's normal. It's not normal not to do that, but you can get the better than normal results. It's just you have to do it with no excuses, with a lot of compassion. Can you do it? Of course you can. Only good words. Add that as a module. You could add it as a minor austerity module or a minor awareness and mindfulness module. Now see, people from farms, they will not likely have a problem with cursing, which is verbal vulgarity. And I say this as someone who's said a lot of curses, and it really was unskillful. It's nothing to be proud about. It's something to be ashamed of. But of course, don't overdo it. But of course, it's the equivalent of, farting out loud. It's another sound people find embarrassing or laughable. It's inappropriate. There's ways of mitigating the strategy. If you are having intestinal problems, you should probably go outside for the sake of others and see how civility can work with words too. Be very mindful of what goes in and what comes out of your mouth. You should, if you're not mindful enough, make a list, make a journal. Write down everything you put in your mouth and track it over a week or a month or a year. Why not? It's much more important information than when Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. But a lot of you know that, but not the method I just described. But you can start it right now. And you can send me a coffee as a thanks for that new idea that will bring you unforetold good things in the future just by monitoring and correcting, but not striving for perfection. Just being aware of also your failings. Like, where are you failing? What is it you can change little by little so that you're not eating too much? You should be looking fit and trim physically and the equivalent mentally as well. And if you have a lot of craving, you eat too much, right? That's greed. You have a problem with that. Eat too much, get fat, that's a physical problem. It does debilitate you. It makes everything more difficult. It makes getting up more difficult, sleeping more difficult, moving more difficult. Why make your life more difficult? That's the opposite of our practice is unburdening. So you unburden the pounds with the sword of Buddha diet, and you unburden your mind with the sword of Buddha that just slices through kilesas as if they were air. But you try to do that with your hands, you'll never get through them. Your bare hands, impossible. With the sword of Buddha, whoosh, cuts through it like butter. So any kind of defilement that you're clinging to that has been classified, not by me, mind you. Don't take my word for it. I discovered this knowledge under mountains of nonsense. And it turned out to be a wish-granting jewel. Of immense value, a meteor in terms of wisdom. That, if practically applied, practically translated, because it was really a translation issue, nothing else other than that, just imagine. Scores and scores and scores of Latin books that weren't translated but were sitting around, like, I don't know, Ovid, Homer, these guys. It was written a long time ago. Who cares? That's essentially the Padujis that feign call me their crap temporary. They really don't exist. But as mammalian creatures, we can all have compassion for each other, especially brothers and sisters. We living here in this purgatorial realm where we can be so deluded, which is a part of perspectionism. So if you're ever feeling really jammed up about something, maybe assume with some compassion that perhaps you're deluding yourself, especially when you only got 2 minutes left to live. If you have to take that radical viewpoint to break those attachments, because it is true, talk to your doctor. Could I die in the next 2 minutes? Yes or no? He has to say that it's possible. How fast does it take for a human body to die? Perhaps it's faster. What's the official method? That's all he could say with a surety. Well, then, you would have the spasms, and then rigor mortis would set in. Maybe he would say it was a half hour. You have a half hour to live, right? But he's going to say something. He's going to put it at a number because he needs to know that information, because he's in the health and human variable game. I was walking down the same flight of stairs I've walked down 10,000 times, but this time I slipped. That slipper that I meant to mend, I just thought, well, It's another day, it hasn't happened. I know I should have gotten around to it. Well, it snagged. Perhaps the weather changed, so a splinter arose. It was a solid hardwood staircase that seemed to lead down into infinity. As this place let you know who was really in charge, and that's not mindfulness. That's being more mindful of sloppy words, and also how the frequency. We're talking too much. We don't have to say everything we think. You should only say something that is meaningful. And if you're around people that are meaningful, they will abide by the same rules instead of just jamming the airwaves with a lot of papa la pop, which is the Pali term for it. So right there, 2,500-year-old, 600-year-old home run. Psh, you're not special. Your bad habits aren't special. Your waste of time and your unnecessary suffering is not special. No matter who you are, it doesn't matter. Just, again, depersonalize. You're just a number. A million, 1 billion in purgatory. Your problems, they're not so special as you think. What is problematic is how you're looking at things. What you're thinking about. When, why. And what comes out of your mouth and what goes into your mouth. And not being mindful of those things. Do not let one vulgar word cross your lips for one day. Why not? And then extend it from 1 to 2 to 3 to then every damn day. Now see that word, somebody would say, well, look, you tone it down, right? Fade bad speech. Say less. And then do not use, there's so many ways to express yourself. Don't just take these cliched, vulgar, reactive words into your mouth or your mind. Why would you say F this or F that if something adverse happens to you? Isn't that an indication of unskillfulness? How about pause, take a deep breath, and look at things in a skillful way instead? Where has that art gone? It seems to be lost. Well, if it is, then reinvent it, reinstitute it. It's your life and the lives of others that you negatively affect with your sloppy expressions that are vulgar, misleading, bizarre, ridiculous, and out of a poison pipe of distribution that you got splashed with, but you need to clean yourself off. Don't put bad words in your mouth or in the airwaves. Respect the people around you. Think of the most holy person you know or could possibly imagine is in your vicinity. That's the way you should be walking. What if a saint could hear you? You should have that kind of mindfulness. What would he think of you if you're acting like this or that? Just walked in, homeless, out of the forest, just fresh as a daisy, and hears you talk like this or that. Feel that shame, feel that moment, because that person is around you. It's just you aren't aware of that. You're aware of all of the aggravating things. So that's why you got a hair trigger. You're filled to the brim with aversion and anger and other defilements. That's why. It shows, you can hear it. You can ever listen to animals? I like listening to animals, especially when they're amongst themselves. Now, they're not using human speech, mind you, but they have their own language, dummy. And you can tell after a while, especially if they're your neighbors that know you extremely well, and you know them partially well, If they start making noise, you begin to know what it means. You can understand it. And they can also understand you. You start yelling, that's frightful for them. They understand that. So it's not just the words you use, it's also the tone and the manner in which you use them. And all of that has to do with skillfulness, and that should not be neglected at all. The standards need to be raised. They have been debased. You have people just staring at screens, and some of the most vile stupidities have ever been splashed in people's faces, been normed to some kind of subnormalcy. You need to, again, pull yourself out of the swamp, clean yourself off, and resolve to be better than you were just 5 minutes ago. And guess what? Nobody is coming to do the work for you. It's your job. It's your only damn job in purgatory. Clean up your speech. Make right effort. And weed every damn dumb word out of your vocabulary. Some people wrote in, well, don't get the young folk down so much by yelling at them. Thank you. Well, look, first off, I do not see myself doing that. If they have that misperception, then they need to change it. You can be passionate about things, and it has to do with no one in particular. I imagine many times my younger self, I'm talking to my younger self, I would not hold back. Knowing what I know now, what sufferings I have endured, because I let my exuberance take over at times, I would say, look, curtail your enthusiasm. Really, that can be just as misleading as the bone-crushing kind of depression that can also come after that. So it's best not to take these matters lightly and to take the practice seriously at every age, especially when you are young, and don't get on the wrong track. Don't let them throw you. Don't let your enthusiasm get you committed to a wrong relationship, a wrong situation, a wrong viewpoint, a wrong job, whatever it is. You need to be mindful. The more mindful you are at a younger age and the more you stick with it, the better your results will be no matter what, including old age, sickness, and death, which are unavoidable anyway. But some of you should think about these things, especially when suddenly you become deathly ill, that you take 5 minutes to contemplate how serious it is, this thing, this dimension, this opportunity to become better, mind moment by mind moment, because some people don't have very many left. Especially the young people hearing this now that think, oh, I'm going to live forever. They're looking at a chart. Average age of death. You're not going to make it if you live foolishly. And if you encounter just changing forms and conditions, there's that truck going, the brakes are out. 5 minutes after you hear this, it could happen. It's a worldwide audience. There's people that have listened to me, they're long dead. They only got to listen to 5 minutes. First episode. They were killed listening to me. You're going to say, oh, it couldn't have happened. That's what, the numbers are astronomical, and they're just going up because everyone's going to die that ever heard this or hears this. Because that is forever true. You're young, take your life a little bit more seriously than you might think you should. Don't get clowned into taking these matters lightly. But of course, you can overdo that. You can take life too seriously. That's wrong too. See, you thought I was going to make that mistake. Look at me, I just sidestepped it. That cannonball, I'm not taking that cannonball. You shouldn't take that cannonball. Don't dismiss these arguments based on what you are essentially sophist kinds of cynical viewpoints. Let me tell you, the whole sophist school came into disrepute, and they were very clever in, playing the lawyer game with relatives, people on the street, sort of like Socrates, some veteran that had an axe to grind. Always the wisest one because of doubt, the hindrance and kilesa of doubt. He was an expert in it, like some kind of poison gas. But you can gas a civilization with doubt, and he sort of did. And his dramatic exit, why would you drink that? When they gave you exile in Greece, I don't care what they said about barbarians in Greece. There's no such thing. If you're in Greece, the paradisical circumstances already put you in the heavenly abodes. Now, would I say that about Greenland? Not necessarily, no. There you need more skill. What about Paraguay? I don't know. I mean, there's some nice parts, there's some nice flowers, but they also have some really dangerous animals out there in the jungle. And people too. But it's not Greece, is it? So back then, when there was even just a fraction of humanity to speak of, yeah, okay, it was austere, but still, drink hemlock for dramatic effect to prove your theory, or you were just bored with life. I do see some surface area that one could use to critique such a method from such a person that seems so wise and noble, but who knows? Finally, okay, on a certain side, you can use his method to break down delusional theories, but if you don't have anything in its stead, it's just a gimmick, isn't it? So don't stop with the gimmick and call yourself a sophist, because that would be the continuation of the school, and that term actually does have a bit of worldly truth in it, because people got a bad reputation for following those methods and going too far with them, until it became wrong effort and wrong view. But you can imagine if something like that is presented to you as the pan-ultimate achievement, as far as being an intellectual goes, that if you happen to be a genius, at some point would slap you in the face, like it did Nietzsche and a bunch of others that found it all extremely disappointing on levels that are incomprehensible to Bedouges in general, but rest assured are excruciatingly disappointing, especially if you studied such things or believed in such things for years and years and years and years, especially if you had to learn a language to find that out. Especially when compared to learning Pali instead of ancient Greek, and then reading something really of note versus what many theologians did for many centuries, of which Nietzsche was perhaps the most disappointed of them all, which we can have a lot of compassion for at this later stage of the information age. We can grant all parties points. Coming back to microenvironments or fighting chalasis, just like a photographer needs to switch from his location, GPS kind of way of thinking, versus being very sensitive and aesthetic, you have to look, you might have found a good location or one you cannot avoid, but it might be littered, so you might take 2, 3, 10 hours, over months even, to just clear your path and the path of others around you that benefit immensely by that, even if there's no way to repay someone who is actively engaged in productively wholesome activities versus the opposite of that, the detrimental effects of that, the health effects, first the physical, but the psychological, I would say they're unquantifiably bigger than, oh, I have a knee injury and now my life is even more complicated, kind of way that purgatory can slide. Dear ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard that before, then you've heard it here. There is a coffee link that's still functional at this time, because Donna helps you. You'll remember it. You will. It'll be realer than anything else. That's something you will remember. And it will provide a lot more than that money could have. Some of the people that helped the Buddha out, they have, there's been many legends surrounding them. Just inconsequential, nobody kind of people that manage that. But the reverse of that is also true. People who persecute good people, they are going to fiery places without very many breaks, and nobody should care about their big time problems that manifested themselves in things like tyrannical sadism or masochism or all the other defilements and even weirder ones on top of that don't belong to good life, does it? Not because religious people said so, just because anybody with eyes to see or ears to hear can say so. So what do you offer again? What do you take away? And why is religion important, or repetitive practice in all neutrality that should bring the practitioner good things and not bad things? What's wrong with that concept? There might be some design flaws here and there, but the concept and then the personal responsibility aspect of each practitioner, not institutions, mind you, not corporations, individual people that have agency to take that personal responsibility and then harvest the good causality of good things, of which ignorance is not one. But, dear brothers and sisters, we were all born into this world without knowing a damn thing. Not even knowing, and most often, many times told that this was not purgatory. This was something else. It was an elaborate plan for happiness and success, but that's not... have you listened to other viewpoints about this place? They're very multifaceted, very old, and very, shall we say, illuminating. Even just a couple parts of it, but a lot of it. If you take the entirety of it, it could blind you versus the dimness of neo-barbarism that was deliberately manifested to drive people off a cliff, and it sure did, didn't it? But not all of us. And not those that practice daily, momently. There's no, oh, I'm putting this off till next week. But, oh, put that email off till next week, but don't put the practice off. Someone said out loud, oh, these are strange opinions. What should we believe? What should we think of those? Look, this is not here to be persuasive. This is just a tale for entertainment purposes alone. And those that engage in the practice, they know why they do that. They're not crazy. They're the opposite of that. They are the definition of sanity and how you get there and stay there and cultivate an immense amount of gratitude for all of the noble teachers and all of the noble practitioners that have gone through the hell realms and more, and still look at how they practice. God bless them all. Someone wrote in and said, please, 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 please don't die in the next 2 minutes. Think of how they screamed at Ananda for being so careless. Don't even think for a minute that you should throw this chance away. Bonne chance, mon ami. And while you're at it, talk about mountaineering again. You haven't been talking about that in a while. Why? Thank you. Well, it was such a question. What should one say? But yeah, mountaineering, you don't get to choose the face or the conditions, changing forms and conditions. You don't get to choose the rock of that cliff. You don't get to choose the weather conditions, but you are confronted with a situation where you could die very easily. Gravity, it's against you. It's pushing you horizontally down to depths that will destroy you. And just on that boulder wall, if you've ever been there, up, I don't know, perhaps above a kilometer in height, sheer vertical drop, and the wind, and all those variables I was telling you about, in the Taoist tradition, it is not skillful to fail under any circumstances. Because if you need to have an irrational reason, you can just say, this is purgatory. It's been reestablished. Which is a dynamic kind of understanding that lets us let some old ideas go, that everything was going to go well for us forever, as in the heavenly realms, while we're still in purgatory. Brothers and sisters, I do not want to be a fair weather friend and tell you fairy tales. Religion was developed, at least in its initial stages, to help the practitioners to live good lives. That's it. There's no other conspiracy than that. And true religion, it is that. False religion is not that. But we have these brands and brand loyalty, and we have attachments. Oh my goodness, these attachments. You want to let go, you're attached, you can't let go. If you didn't have that chain around your leg, you would have been free, but you haven't. So what now? Should we forget compassion? Should we say, oh, that person, just like me, with just a few different variables, look at them suffering so needlessly because of that. Can we not see that in purgatory? And say, look, it doesn't have to be that way. Not for me, not for mine, no soul. Not me, not mine. It's not yours. If you're a practitioner, no unnecessary suffering is yours. Anybody come up, try to put the headlock on you, especially those kilesas that come from inside, take radical personal responsibility now for unskillfulness. You miss the target in archery, it's really nobody else's fault. Of course, there's the worldly winds. Everybody knows that, that's been in purgatory. And experience suffering on levels that you possibly can't imagine. Let's just say right now you should be superstitious about that, because your problems might just appear delusionally to be more than that, but I'm very, 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 very certain that the saints suffered more amongst other holy people that we should admire and try to understand, and not spit in their faces or think that they were fools when they were not. That we can accept these traditions and not need to have dogmatic kinds of positionings that cause unnecessary suffering. And yet at the same time, we cannot be friendly with unfriendly people whose actions are discernibly so, because that would be illusory, wouldn't it, of the good, the opposite of the good, even if we get behind or beyond good and evil. And it's really for the sake of them who are so self-deceived that they would employ such a covert strategy that could only be based on delusion, because the causality of such horrors against all good things in the universe is evil for those practitioners that are so deluded and egoically, how shall we say, concentrated in a position that's very misguided, just on subjective terms, but data backs it up. People, come on, look, my comedy routine, don't take this stuff too seriously. If you eat too much, which is really ridiculous, you become too fat, it's bad for your health. That's it. It's causality. Take your personality out of it, please. If I did that, I would get fat. Am I a bad person? No. I'm a mammalian creature. I have some failings that can add up. But on the other hand, look at the amazing impact, the explosive impact that real noble kinds of accomplished, skillful people can have on world culture. Anyone can read Shakespeare and take something away from it. It really doesn't discriminate, but we need to be very discriminating in matters that do matter, that they said doesn't. You've neglected some things very close to the ground. That's why you didn't see them. You were hypnotized by them. And that's why they had such a unfathomably negative effect on Western civilization in the last 30 years. So just ditch it and change your mind. If that was your ego invested in some weird narrative, invent a new one from scratch, like with flour and some water, and knead that into some dough and cook it into some bread and eat that, because the old stuff, it's no longer fresh, to put it euphemistically, and it wasn't really meant to be that. So if you're invested in that narrative, you need to divest yourself from narratives. See, traders know how to do this. Traders get tricked all the time. Traders get tricked all the time. Look at them. Look how naive they are. Look how greedy they are. Look how delusional they are. Look at how they lost all their money, 90%. But these are rational people. These are, serious players in a serious economy. And look at how they're getting trashed left and right with their misguided economic theories that also corresponds to just misguidedness in general, which leads to what? Good things? No. Keep it simple, people. Bad things, that's it. That's the essence of the difference between good and bad religions. So take some, I advocate an eclectic strategy without a lot of dogmatism, and just say, well, I could be deceived. The mensch strategy. Can you adopt the mensch strategy? Just for 1 second. Can you afford that? Can you? Why can't you? Think it over. someone wrote in and asked, you mentioned a few things about doubt, and all of that is quite insightful. Can you say a few more words? Thank you. Yeah, doubt, don't just look at it as negative. Doubt was built into you to be positive. It's just if you go past the middle path, it becomes negative like any other good thing. Being cautious, it's good. Then you don't hurt yourself. But if you're overly cautious, then you're hindering yourself, you see. So that's essentially what differentiates neurosis from healthy ways of thinking and acting and seeing things in a perspectionist context that gives you infinite variability and optionality to see things in an enlightened way finally, and not in one that provokes, sustains, feeds, energizes all of the kilesas or mind poisons that one potentially could manifest. But thanks to enlightened practice, suddenly, as if there was a sea change, a dramatic awakening kind of change, that one just said, you know what, no, I don't need to engage in unnecessary suffering of any kind, especially some kind of psychological nature for narrative reasons that perhaps have been concocted by disinformational elements that might have come into illicit funding or what's that word I find so illicit kinds of political, cultural, economic conceptualities that from the standpoint of causality, have had tragic manifestations. Is that euphemistic enough? Why not? Look, there's no cool thing about just being angry and disillusioned and just negative all the time, because what is that? You're smart and you're that. That's not what smart looks like. You should be looking towards good things, and if people discredit themselves or ideas or dumb ideas, then you don't have to do that. But people misrepresenting things or just being negative all the time might not be the kinds of people that one needs necessarily. But if they're told what to do and they do that, then that might be good enough, is it not? And if things improve, then why shouldn't people improve their moods and their perspectives that are so voluntary or involuntary? But essentially, yes, everyone needs to recognize that they hold ultimate personal responsibility for their views, opinions, or the converse of that, having none, or having had some, but then divesting oneself of those things, and going through various purification rituals with no self or fading of a self, no ego. Ego is not your amigo kind of thing. Then you can then change your opinion, say, hey, I'm not invested in that position. I divested myself. I took the 5% loss. But thanks to risk management and my discipline, I cut my losses. And then, do you know what my third, fourth, or fifth pick was? It was such a winner that I have the trillionth to the trillionth kind of return on that. That wise people since the beginning of time have declared with a surety was priceless, and it is. So stay on the noble high path, dear brothers and sisters. Someone wrote in, it's like, yeah, I was laughing when you're talking about the pseudo-intellectual class. Can you give a historical example? Thank you. Yeah, well, see, I keep remembering that all the smart old people have died off and we're living in a sort of post decapitation phase where you have young idiot people that don't know what happened before and are just misinformed about history. There's alternative realities, right? Yeah, just like all the Russians, they got a different historical, World War II started in 1941 as far as they're concerned. All their history books, what? You said a different number? Get out of the room. You're a CIA agent. These leftoids, they're like Borg. They have the same flippant explanation. See again, I said leftoids. They're the pseudo-intellectuals. Like that is, according to their theoreticians, the only thinking class is the class that they allow to be that. Just like some kind of unionized job. You don't get into the university and you don't stay there if you do not conform to their worldview. And either they have total control or they have control of departments. It's a gradual movement towards total control, which is their march through the institution's methodology. This was also allowed by Western Opies of the Roosevelt and Lyndon B. Johnson variety because they were on board with central planning. They were just waiting for the utopianist day when it would one day bring about paradise on earth. And if those zany pseudo-Russians could figure it out, well, they would implement it in the West, and it would be one world of central planning. But until that happened, well, let them do experiments on the Eastern Europeans and Russians like rats. Oh, Chinese too. And whatever Southeast Asian countries. And African, Morocco was a nice place. Or Mozambique was a paradise before they got set up. There's some phony version of leftoidism. And then you had Cambodia, Cambodia, 1975, Pol Pot, a little globo troll, wined and dined and trained in Paris by leftwoods and sent back to his home country to turn that central planning model into a new paradise. Got greenlighted on that. So who supported him? Well, you guessed it, the pseudo-intellectual leftoids at the time all jumped on bandwagons for that new utopia that was going to be unleashed. And just basically conforming to the disinformational, cult-like adherence, emotionalized truth. You're saying it's not going to work? Doubter, look, why? You can't be in this group. This is a chicken coop, and all the chickens in here must think this way. Because our pseudo-intellectual taskmasters have said so. So march, march, march. So again, versions about like this tolerated by PCOP, dingbats, central planners in disguise. In the West, in universities, says we're smart people we're supposed to be. And so you had 15,000 Swedes, imagine that, going on the streets. Sweden that almost got taken over, in the Winter War. Finland was right next door. The whole peacenik kind of idealism was challenged. It's not like they were completely divorced from war. World War II was pretty close to. But by 1975, by golly, their Opie class had let their universities get so rotted out that 15,000 Swedes went on the street chanting and marching in a unilateral way, like a duplicate way of other leftoid pseudo-intellectuals all around the world. Yay! They even made up fake songs singing, yay, in Cambodia. Well, it turns out that was a big failure, when you see, I'm going to invent a new term called the pittas, or the pits. See, you have pseudo-intellectual, and then you got to put the TS, tyrannical sadist, on it too. Because that whole process I described where you cannot be off the party position and the party position changes, that's tyrannical sadism. Now I'm not going to point fingers, but there's a certain type of gender that can deal with tyrannical sadism more because they have that kind of switch that they flip in their heads. Oh, what, this is the new roles? Okay. Different roles? Oh, okay. What do I have to say? Oh, okay. What am I again? Oh, I'm an intellectual? Oh, that's right. Whereas, people of integrity don't do that. But mass movements that involve a certain personality like that, they just go with what's popular today, and if they need to hound out somebody who's off narrative, then that's just again, chicken coopist kind of methodology that they have. But in any case, years later when it came out, that was a complete debacle and genocide and a tyrannical sadist exercise in bloodlust. Do you think those pseudo-intellectuals, pits that had gone through the university system and were accredited and placed in blobs around the country as journalists or professors or know-it-alls of all kinds, do you think they recanted? Do you think they felt shame for being wrong? Or would that be a projection on your part? Because no, they didn't. They didn't recant. They didn't feel shame. It was just the phony fun bus moved on to some other position where they could maintain some kind of veneer of respectability, and by golly, they were sticking to that story. Were we that? No, we didn't do that. Oh, just deny it. I wasn't there, or I didn't witness it, or that was a story, or it was over-exaggerated anyway, and what's on TV, and it's on to the new thing. So pseudo-intellectuals are not serious people. They just pretend to be. And they can make themselves very annoying with them and their amplifiers. If someone tells them that you've crossed them on some level, you're a bad person, that's it. Just like Pol Pot was a good person until somebody told them that he wasn't, then you're a bad person until somebody tells them you're not a bad person. But their minders will not be telling them that you're a good person if you really are one, because they're not really good, are they? Pits, yes. The pits, the pseudo-intellectual tyrannical sadist group. So yeah, it's a warlike measure, a cultural warlike measure. It's organized, it's recognizable, it's repeatable, it's scalable. And the West got shot through with it based on the, like I said, I call it sort of the straight man routine, where the PCOPs were in on the joke, just everybody wasn't. And they pretended to be aghast or appalled by the results of the little scamps that they secretly were in cahoots with, or wished would have succeeded, because then they would have adopted it in an instant. Because they are on the central planning side, because they're on the central banking side, which is, again, not a Western idea, really. Although some people might say there was a lot of rent-seeking in leadership structures of the past, I still think it hasn't reached the scale that we can witness in post-industrial times, and also to the detriment and or extermination of it, the entire kind of societies that, for example, aristocrats of the past were not really interested in, like full of replacement or reduction of people just to bipedism. Just, interchangeable parts. They weren't really that radical, were they? Because their policies didn't reflect it. Whereas these new central planners don't seem to have that kind of distinction because they've already lost their connection to humanity, I would say, on some level. At least a good relationship with it. But why would that be so surprising if we're talking about essentially people who shake down, bleed, and predate upon the productive and working segments of society based on systemic kinds of positions that are rather questionable when you get right down to it, have a detrimental effect in a macroeconomic sense, but via smoke and mirrors appears not to be that, or at least not monolithically that. But if they just keep playing their straight man routine so that the pits become more and more the orthodoxy, then you're going to have an outbreak at some point of some form of pseudo-intellectual tyrannical sadism on a mass scale, which you could sort of say COVID-19 was a modern outbreak of it. Now, what will happen? Will it come back in that type of form again? Possibly. But if we're already talking about the history of purgatory, then you don't have to get too worked up on just utterly horrible and ridiculous things happening here, which has happened and doesn't appear to be on the way to not doing that, at least for the time being. So smoke them if you've got them, but do realize that at this time we have a failed and complicit leadership class on a socioeconomic and political level. And we have pits. The left has gone to the pits, and the right, we have essentially a fake right wrapper for PCOPs. So 2024, there you go. Is it comedy? Is it politics? You decide. Oh, comedy, politics, or purgatory. Or all three, you decide. Now, someone wrote in and was like, well, what should we do? What I can discern from peer groups is that people that are subjected to sadist conditions start to adopt even worse strategies, such as Ludditism or Kaczynskiism or something like that. And that's picked up upon by foreign adversaries and presented in a pseudo-intellectual fashion to be the right way, when in fact it's just a strategy of multipolar actors to further worsen the situation. Oh my goodness, is that what they would do? Is that what they would do? Is that what they do? So what should we do? Thank you. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Our adversaries don't want us to solve the pits problem. And many of them are pits themselves. Like all of their projections are based on their own pitism. Essentially, so you know when they're in the room and you know how they think, and they think the way they think, and they project that way of thinking on others. So, they're not people you want to have in the room or people influenced by them, poids and roids, trying to solve your problem. So no, Ludditism is not the answer, people. And I understand that people go crazy under sadistic conditions and they adopt even worse strategies for themselves. They do. It's really disturbing. It's grotesque. It's disgusting. It's a war crime, especially when it's done en masse. It's done propagandistically. It becomes genocidal. It's absolutely a war crime. It's disgusting. But this is what happens in purgatory. And so we can look to it, and we can also resolve ourselves not to go the same way. Yes, you're getting punched in the face, metaphorically, on a daily basis, but it doesn't do you any good to punch your own self in the face or adopt even worse strategies for dealing with it. So it's we come back to purgatorial mitigation strategies. And I think the Buddha is a good example of someone who was also looking for purgatorial mitigation strategies and found some success in that. You have to realize that the ultimate mitigation strategy will not really put you into the center of things. It will sort of probably put you on the fringe of things, because if we accept the reality of this dimension, the main show is going to be greed, ill will, and delusion. If we're just running the numbers, and central planners, well, they say they run the numbers, but then they falsify the data at the end. Oh my God. It's hilarious. Does that happen with criminally minded people that are obsessed with greed? Or would they condemn themselves? What? Question conceit? No, change their positions? Well, most of them won't. Which is why I would say enlightened leadership should be leadership that is constantly working to reduce greed, ill will, and delusion. And if you look at how Europe, for example, emerged from barbarism, it was really its religious institutions that made that possible by inculcating people with right religious principles, not the doctrine necessarily, but some kind of way of life, way of looking at purgatory that mitigated some of the worst aspects of it. And universities, they were led by religious people. Yes, religious people in the true sense of the word. Now, of course, there were appointees, but generally the culture was, at least when it was effective, was one that was producing people that were actively engaged in reducing the kilesas, and specifically greed, ill will, and delusion. Now, we could say to greater and lesser degrees of success, what happens when you extend Christian charity to horrible, harmful, hostile peoples? Well, predictable results. for predictable reasons, just not for the people who are not skillful enough to see when they shouldn't be necessarily friendly to hostile third parties who might be misrepresenting themselves. Oops, that would be delusion again, right? You get those two things wrong, you're not a good person, and what you're doing isn't good either, not for yourself and not for others. But try telling them that, well, if they're delusional and they have the conceit that they know what they're talking about or doing, not going to change, are they? So we've certainly had a rash of those. So it's not goodness that leads to badness, it's not goodness. But a lot of good people don't know how to differentiate between the two, i.e. they're unskillful and it leads to disastrous outcomes. So at some point, because they did have some success, they thought, well, this is the model for export. And it became delusional, it became counterproductive, and it became the opposite of good. So you can always have that phenomenon. It really does depend on the sort of leadership personalities that have some kind of cultural influence, that if they go by the way that I just described, will lead that institution off a cliff. Too much goodness, again, it's not good. There's only a limited amount of things you can do, the limited amount of people, and you have to have boundaries. Yeah, what do the pits not respect? What the sadists don't respect? They don't respect boundaries. You want to have a church and talk bad about us? No. Not allowing that. We're here now. This is our church, We're going to just fabricate a history and say, you were terrible since the beginning. That's what we're going to do. Boundaries, schmoundaries. So, but yeah, with humanity, if you approach it with compassion, look, we're fallible. Including the idiot people that want to adopt Ludditism in this time of unbridled sadism. That's not the way forward. But I do understand people can be driven crazy in this time and are being driven crazy. And in many cases it's intentional, but in many cases it isn't. But if you're trying to pound a round peg in a square hole, you need to start adopting a purgatorial mitigation strategies, which has a religious component, which, let's say, is a true religion, which it might not be the religious brand that you're looking for. Oh, I'll just take this off a shelf, Buddhism off a shelf, or Christianity, this new version of it, or because it doesn't work that way. The real practice is the one that gets real results, and it's not necessarily a group exercise. But I understand people don't want that. They want to be in a group. They want the group to tell them what to do. There's people that are built for that. I understand that. But see, then they need to be told what to do and then do it by the people that have done the work to be the real thing, and perhaps have institutions that reliably produce people that, although they might be the normal padooch going in, come out not that. Come out someone who is aware of human failings, has compassion to an extent, but also has principles and practices that keeps them mostly free, or free to a large extent, of the kalesis, and not just in appearances, but in reality, right? In psychology, psychologically, spiritually. consistently. And that is a tall order. But it's not impossible. And even if you're not individually going to be the world leader that brings about a new era of peace, prosperity, civility, dignity, and respect, you might just be some mitigating force, some ancillary force to that. But even if you don't have a social, political, or economic impact necessarily, you at least live within a psychological reality that is congruent with what I just outlined, because it has individual spiritual benefits outside of a materialistic concept that is meaningful and real, despite what Paduji Ding Dangs may or may not believe, or want to believe, or admit. Because that would essentially be super normal, and that's certainly not what they are, is it? So you're looking for applause, you're not going to find it necessarily. But as far as, your own salvation, to use a Christian term, goes, that it can have a positive causal impact on that. And that's really all one can hope for in purgatory. So, in other words, if it catches on like it did in the Buddhist case, and it affects a whole lot of people's lives positively, that's great for you. It's not just great for everyone else. And it's great for you going into the bardos, not necessarily in purgatory, where people will continually be tested and will, in many cases, fail over and over again until they get it right, or not. When the planet, when all the oceans evaporate from this planet, they will be stuck here as pretas for eternity, those that didn't get it. So if you think that sounds like a nice punishment, think again. That doesn't sound very nice to me. And that's certainly how it's going to play out. At least that's what astronomy confirms at this time. I don't see that changing. Although human social structures can become more stupid and destructive with or without that knowledge. But to leave it on an upside or up note, human societies can also improve. They can get a little bit better based on changing forms and conditions. And you can also be a catalyst for that where you are, especially in your own microenvironments. And that is all you can do. And you really can't do any more than that, especially with the forces and dimensions and the architecture involved in this place. But that should be a great sense of relief and not a sense of irritation, unless somehow delusionality has crept into your analysis. I also want to point out that leftoids and pits, they're big into plugging into ill will. They do market studies, they do market research, they find out what really annoys people, and then they do that and then capitalize that and then misdirect that as well. So we don't just have that on the leftoid side. Just look at how they misused the leftists of France after the Franco-Prussian War, for example. Turned them essentially into a murder machine. A cultural murder machine that's still lawn mowing itself around Europe. But let's not forget the fake left and libertarians do the same thing. but essentially that's fake right wealth guarding opies that have this, again, pseudo intellectual movement that they pooped in a can and pop out whenever they feel like people are becoming too disillusioned with the leftoidist. They have that safety valve, fake right kind of fake alternative that they want to steer all of that overwhelming anger and disappointment and betrayal to that, instead of real solutions that require fundamental changes, such as getting rid of central banking and the financial, speculative, and political class that post-industrial Western countries are afflicted by at this time. That would be counterproductive for them. But we're really only talking about maybe 1,000 people, maybe, again, 10,000 worldwide that are profiting by that in terms they understand. But just like any other criminal operation, it's ultimately a gigantic loser. Break the window, steal the radio, cause, $2,000 worth of damage a working person has to figure out. But they got it for free. They just had to be that bold, right? Have a hammer and be at the right place at the right time and get away with it. Look at that, 100% profit model. That's how these opies are rolling. Someone wrote in and asked, well, what do you think your most important work is to date? Because the impressiveness of it is really beyond all comprehension. Thank you. Well, I would say really my work focusing on the kilesas and their attachment to self or concepts of self. And then the skill to break that causality with right view and right effort. Putting the focus on those two, particularly because of the delusionary aspect of even academics or geniuses, highly, 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 highly skilled and insightful visionaries, that even they can be plagued by these things. In fact, they could be plagued the most if their imagination gets the best of them and they pick up something terrible like doomerism instead of, hey, we are here now and there is nothing in the world that makes us, it has to force us to see things in such a way that would negate our lives or berate our lives or question our lives or infer something else other than from our lives than that we are living creatures. Each and every one of us is a living creature, and we deserve a little bit of compassion, if from no one else, because that might be the case for weeks, months, years, decades, you name it. But if you don't have a requirement for it, because if it comes, it comes, and changing forms and conditions, then it's never coming too late or too early, or it's just, this is what things are. This is what happened. One was misunderstood, then one was understood, then one was misunderstood again. From oneself and others. See, if you can do it to yourself and say, hey, wait a second, why did I see things that way for so long? Why? I really only did myself the damage. The hitting the hand with a hammer phenomenon, unnecessary suffering, that's what it is. But it's not the way you think. Yeah, that dumb way, anybody could see that and stop doing that. It's the subtle and complicated and things based in the past or in the future. The topic is pretty wide ranging, but it does boil down to variables and an invested psychological attachment to some version of self, where those things matter, when they need not matter. Change your point of view, doesn't matter. Or one of the best ones, the redemptive module. This was my test, and now I'm redeemed from it. I don't just say that I let it go or forgot about it or put it away as not meaningful, necessarily not determinate. Meaningful it was, but it was not determinate. It was meaningful in that you were able to use it as fuel for transformation in a good way. Motivation to let things that aren't wholesome go. So that redemptive module actually works. It's not just a theory. And it can be as messy as it needs to be. Just like a garbage disposal unit, because that garbage that goes in that disposal unit, it's a lot sometimes. It has to process a lot in some cases, but see, it doesn't fail if the electricity is working and the mechanics are free to move and you know there's a button and you push it, and it all goes away. The kilesa is drained of its poison, reduced. And that's not to say it won't ever go away completely, although some people have managed it. Just like some people have had bad skin for a while, but then they cured themselves, and then for the rest of their lives, they were blessed with some kind of vitality regarding their skin that like protected them, that people were envious of later in life. Like, how did they hold up so well? Kind of phenomenon. That's how you can transform your kilesas or your problems or your variables into fuel for wholesomeness. Not in that you're interacting with them, but you really are letting them go consistently until it's automatic. It's ingrained. It is a new reality. So yeah, as far as the importance of work goes, I think that's quite a contribution to the arts and sciences. Certainly of this forsaken time, but not so as forsaken as you would think, because of all the good friends that were able to cure themselves of just heart-wrenching, gut-busting, head-busting, soul crushing kinds of things that don't bother them now anymore, thanks to a method that I helped put together as a program, as a stool with legs, as a living being with feet, the optionality. To not just recognize what's better for you, but to implement it consistently, reliably, and forevermore, not just in this life. So how about the Benedict model or module? Although, we have to go back to his time. He was in very barbaric times. The Middle Ages were very barbaric. In a certain sense, they really were. Just think how limited, like me, I might speak or could understand 100 languages. They never really got to get outside of their dialect. Europe was very primitive for many centuries, very agrarian. And it was really Christianity, or let's say new versions of it for the time, that were able to have a positive effect socially, really did make the difference in bringing us all these good things, including ethics and laws and standardizations and the ability to cooperate with people that might be a little different, but also to be able to communicate and also wish all living creatures well, especially the noble, the good, the accomplished. I think at this point, many people overlook Germany, but they have played a crucial role in civilization of modern times, but they seem to have lost their way. But they can find their way back, I'm sure, and so can different social models that also have a religious component that lets people know that there's a good path and a bad path, and if they follow the good path, they'll really, really, really get good things. Even if they don't get good things, they'll get a good life. Kind of argument versus if you don't have a Lamborghini, then you're a bad person or something strange like that, which just by default becomes some kind of norm because one is capitalistic or atheistic or some such other weird perspective that has a strong egoic component that acts more as a hindrance and a blockage to the true path than really need be necessary. If you took an opposite approach and just faded it or deflated it, that you could then have the preconditions of being able to change your mind without egoic or shadoic preventatives on a psychological level. Does that sound familiar to you? Does that sound plausible? It should, because that's essentially the process in a nutshell that one can disturb. And although counterintuitive, big babyists get very flinchy at this point because they don't believe that there's anything on the other side of a deflated self. They think that's defeat or death, or they invented these dramatic terms. Ego death is one of them. But yeah, okay, when you're experiencing that, it's quite disturbing. But if you stick with it, you will have benefits, not deficits. But you do need to survive that period. Some people at that point, it's all over for them. They're convinced their life is over. She broke up with me, I'm 21, that's it. Threw themselves in front of trains. By the thousands and millions, really. Don't underestimate these things. Every day is happening somewhere. More people, more bipeds, especially unskillful ones, that don't have their passions under some kind of context or aren't able to contextualize them apart from oneself. These people are electrocuted by the kilesas, and their tragic ends. Absolutely. Now, if you see, you could see it tragically or comically. I know a lot of people out there think that's funny because it's not them. And a lot of quote-unquote bad people do get zapped by these things, and a lot of people say that's just causality, that's justice, right? That's de jure, the karmic or dharmic kind of automaticity that bad deeds, bad views can lead to. Oh, sure, I understand electricity. Let me take these big wires. I'm going to cut this one in half. Then I'm going to connect this one to that one type of personality. You all know these types of people. They know it better. Can't convince them. Boom! There's just an arc of electricity that comes out of the wall. And they're just frying. life is frying them. The smoke's coming off, hair stand. Every bit of their skin burns black. Teeth showing. Even that finally disintegrates. That's what life, this purgatory, will do to a fool. So that's why the Buddha said one of the biggest blessings in the whole wide world is not being around or associated or in the vicinity of foolish people. Quite the contrary, being in the vicinity of wise people or in the company of them, it's a blessing. That's a blessing. That's a heavenly, cosmic, karmic, fateful, kalyana mitta kind of blessing to be amongst good people. Know of a good person. A doctor that does heal people and doesn't overcharge them and has saved lives. So it's not a question of what his motives might be. It's unquestionable that these kinds of realities exist in this realm. It's just not all the time in all places, and in bad places it don't happen at all. And why is that? Well, there's been a causality loop of badness, and you need to jumpstart the situation, but not necessarily interact with it. It has to take its own course. There's only so much an individual can do in purgatory. Hello? Hello, are you listening to me? We have changing forms and conditions, and also a couple of other things allied against us, insanity and rationality and everything else. So in case you haven't noticed, see, comedy routine people, see, that's why people bring diapers to my comedy routine, because they can't get out of the room without losing complete control how funny things can be. Because how much preferable is that to seeing it in a tragic light that will take you down like a mermaid into the Mariana Trench of darkness, should you so wish that. But most people don't wish that, but end up being there because they're holding on to these Kalesa-like entities and wrong views and a lack of right effort. And of course, a lot of ignorance. It's the most terrible thing. I was doing all these things, I didn't know it caused cancer. Well, now they know, but now we know. Kalesas, they cause all different types of problems. Did you ever hear, when was the first time you heard that word? That's a new word. That was a new word in 2024. But now everybody seems to think they know about it, but how much does the Kaleshas have them under control versus them having Kaleshas under control? And now I'm looking at all the lay people, like directly in the eyes. You, imagine I point, looking directly at you. You're not going to dodge this question. Do the Kalesas have you under control, or do you have them under control? And then I'm just going to sit there and stand in front of you and just stare straight through you like a window. Answer that question. That's why practice is necessary. And it's every mind moment that you can possibly be aware enough to remember to practice. And at some point, if you stick with it, just like there are maestros in orchestras. That metaphor with the musician is very very, how shall we say, almost poetically accurate. Also, playing of bad music versus playing of good music, playing skillfully versus unskillfully, playful experimentation with different instruments. It's not just the instrument you inherited. It's that broke, or you threw it away, or somebody smashed you in the face with it. Right? But then you playfully experiment. You came up with a fantastically better one. And then all of your time, all of your effort, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours went into the new instrument that reliably played the notes. And so when 6 months later, an audience, a couple of padoojas and other hindered people and distracted people happened to hear that music, they were mesmerized. They thought they heard heaven itself. And they never discounted that. They didn't say, well, sometimes you pick up an old newspaper and read some interesting tidbits kind of thing. No, this was the thing. This was the moment. This was the doorway, highway to the noble path. And just like whatever, the fluorescent signs in Albuquerque, once you see them live, you will never forget them for the rest of your life. Just because. So it can happen anywhere to anyone, but a lot of people don't get it. They don't hear it. They don't take it one or two steps further and then experience that aha moment, that satori, that moment where everything changes, even if they didn't want it to, because they finally saw it for the first time. As if being snapped out of a spell. That's that hairline fracture that they can then grow and do grow and then finally become free of all of the things hindering them in this place. And they ascend. Back to trash for a moment, for litter, for the metaphor of it. That, if you are prepared and you have a lot more bags with you than a normal padooch would, then you can have a lot of fun collecting all that great karma by eliminating the bad karma of the careless people that perhaps didn't know that, again, just because of some accident, that their cup would have blown into such a dumb place. And the people were too dumb to pick it up for a while, but now it's gone. So all that good karma goes to, that's right, the practitioner, because that does add up. But it's an internal game. It's not an external game. You're keeping track. And each one of those objects is pretty fascinating. It's almost like urban archaeology. And some of it's useful. Like $2 sometimes shows up or more, 20. Just because that's paper too. So, it's not like that's why you do it though, but it is strange how you do get paid back in more ways than one. But yeah, you got to go outside your comfort zone to find the good stuff, but strategically, where are the nice places so it also gets you out and about? Which is really how urban spaces were meant to function, because anyone can live in the forest, but the whole point of living in a community is to have some communal architecture, communal spaces that, again, are a little bit more interesting than a farmland kind of situation, which is nice in its own way. It's nice to have variability, right? You can go into the town and have a great time, and then go back to the country, have a great time too, kind of win-win situation, instead of nothing out there and nothing in the city either. So that's just the way cities were built, and there's no reason why a pedestrian should not make use of such facilities, such as also bike paths, parks, you name it. It's one of the great things about the United States is that at least our wise ancestors figured out how important parks were and really did invest in them. And some of them are maintained well and others not so well, but still doesn't make them not great places if, micro environment wise, you can help out and remove some debris so that maybe someone who really could use a break actually gets one when they get there. Maybe also unexpectedly so that they can keep being strong for us all, so that we're strong together and we're not just attacking eccentric people for no reason whatsoever. Different thing. Oh my goodness, this is a terrible person. Who can't put up with that. We must know what this person is. We have to psychoanalyze them so that we understand them. So as a projection of something we don't like, for example, it's true for me, so it's true. It's true. Believe us. The ill will crowd, for no other reason than jealousy. If you get right down to it, that's what these projections are about. They want that, but that's how they think they're going to get it. Trauma or disdain. They're so much better, so haughty in their conceit, but what did they deliver again? All about themselves. They're building themselves a castle that they can wall themselves in with and just keep, good times out for themselves primarily. That doesn't sound like a great deal, does it? So this culture has become way ossified. It has cultural revolutionary elements, which is toxic against elder and more wise people. And no, it's not a good thing. And you should change your mind about being vulgar or normal or neo-barbarian. And it's primarily for you. It's not for me. I mean, what? I've got 2 minutes to live, and so do you. It's about living well, dear brothers and sisters, friends. It's not about engaging in any kind of animosity with different kinds of people with different kinds of agendas for different kinds of bad causalities. But the good thing is that every day is a new day for new ideas, and maybe some of the new ones will prevail over the old ones, such as greed, ill will, and delusion, and all the other kilesas on top, with no self, and Om Mani Pad Mi Hum, right? Just little things like that. One by one, step by step, breath by breath. I'm sure everyone can overcome their variables right here, right now, at least right here, right now. Not because they thought they could do it, but because I just told them to do it, and they did, just for a second. They weren't that angry person. Certainly not because of me. No, not because of me. If for any reason, their own damn selves, but they got that under control, don't you? So take a deep breath. Change your mind.